Hey everybody, right now we're going to talk about chapter 5.4 where we're graphing and modeling these two huge equations. But these two huge equations stem from really easy ones that we already know, which is y equals sine x and y equals cos x. So right now we're going to use the two huge equations in the following questions. The first one being, find the amplitude, the period, phase shift, vertical shift, and max and min of this equation. Now I wrote the huge equation that we saw on the first slide so that we can align things and understand them and help us answer the following questions. So we're going to try to find the amplitude first. So the amplitude right here, because we aligned it, we know that it's 3. Now we're going to try to calculate the period. So we know that period is equal to 360 degrees over k. And here we know that k is 120. So it's 360 degrees over 120. And after using a calculator, you can know that the period is 3 degrees. Now we're going to figure out the phase shift. And I know that the phase shift is minus 30 degrees. So because it's minus, we know that the minus is to the right, and then positive is to the left. I know it's a little bit backwards, but that's how it is. So 30 degrees to the right. And now we're going to calculate the vertical shift, and it's 2 units. Now I know it's 2 units up because of this positive symbol. So 2 units up. Now we're going to try to calculate the max and the min. I calculated the max by adding the amplitude to the vertical shift, which is 2, and adding that equals 5. Now to calculate the min, it's minus 3 plus 2, which in the end is equal to minus 1. Why is it that here we use the positive and here we use the negative? Well, that's because, as you can see from this really rough sketch, that the amplitude can be at positive 3 and negative 3, even though it still says 3 in the equation. And so with that vertical shift, we'd use positive in the max because it's at the highest point, and we use negative in the min because it's at the lowest point in the graph. Now we're going to move on to the next question. A sinusoidal function has an amplitude of 5 units, a period of 120 degrees, a max at 0,3. Represent the function in 2 ways. And when they say 2 ways, they mean in the sine and in the cos function. Now I already figured out some things because it would take a little bit too long to write it out right now. So I know that the amplitude is 5 units because it says so in the question. I also know that the max is at 0,3. because it says so in the question. Now I'm calculating the vertical shift, and I did that by taking the max, which is 0,3, and taking the amplitude, which I know is 0,5 because of the 5 units, and I figured out that the difference is 0, negative 2. And because it's negative, we know that it's 2 units down. So again, I have a little rough sketch. Here, the normal function would be like this. So the max should be at 0,5, but because the max is at 0,3, we know that it went 2 units down. Now we're just going to calculate the period. So we know that the period has a period of 120 degrees. So I'm just going to sub that into our equation. And I'm going to try to, I'm going to bring the k to the other side, so that I can take it out from under the 360. So I did that by multiplying the k on both sides. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 120 degrees to isolate the k. And that would mean the k is equal to 3. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the question. And all this information that we figured out here can go in both sine or cos function, and it doesn't change. So again, I wrote it here in the given, and now we're going to just sub it all into the equation. But in this equation, when I'm going to sub it in, I'm not going to have a phase shift. Why is that? It's because the max is at 0,3, and you can see here that the graph starts at 0,3, right? So we're just going to write that in. So y is equal to 5 cos round bracket k, and the reason why we're using round bracket is because, sorry, not k, what? 3, and the reason we're going to use the round bracket is because we're not even going to need the phase shift, so why even write it down, right? And minus 2. And we're going to use a minus because it's 2 units down. And again, we'd write that in a proper therefore statement. Now, we're going to introduce the phase shift in this part of the question because it's sine. And why are we going to introduce it? Well, because you can see here that the max is supposed to be at 0, 3. But for some reason, the max is at 30 degrees 3. So you can see it moved 30 degrees to the right. So in your final equation, the vertical shift would be equal to negative 30 degrees. And we know it's negative because, as I explained before, going to the right is negative. So y is equal to 5 sine square bracket 3 x minus 30 degrees minus 2. So that's another question solved. Now we're going to move on to the final question. Determine the equation of the sine function that represents the graph shown. In your textbook, you wouldn't see that it would be highlighted. It would just be a black graph. But I colored in this part because it's a sine function and that's what they're asking. But also because it has a defined start and end that really helps me figure out my answers. So let's calculate the amplitude. So the amplitude, as we know, is max minus min over 2. We know the max is 5 minus 1 over 2, which would be 4 over 2, which would equal to 2. Now our period would be 90 degrees because we can see here from the increments that this is 90 degrees, is equal to 360 degrees over k. And from that, I figured out that k is equal to 4. Now we're going to figure out the phase shift. Let me just erase all this stuff. Okay, so the phase shift is going to be 30 degrees, and we can see that because the graph starts here. So it's negative 30 degrees, and the vertical shift, I know it's 3. How do I know that? Well, I know that because the amplitude is at 2, 0, 2. But the max here starts at 0, 5. So the difference between those is positive. It's 0, 3. So the vertical shift would be 3 units up. So we're going to just insert everything that we found out in our final equation. So y equals 2 sine square bracket 4 bracket x minus 30 degrees plus 3 because we're going 3 units up. And those are the kind of questions you would see in chapter 5.4. Thank you.